All right, good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. We're very excited about today's conversation. This is the latest webinar in the Supporting Innovation in Education series, and this conversation is going to focus on removing barriers to post-secondary success. We're really excited about our guests today, but before we introduce them, I'm going to turn things over to the Hunt Institute's President and CEO, Dr. Javed Siddiqui, who is going to give some brief welcoming remarks. Over to you, Javed.
Thanks, James. Good morning to all. Excited for this morning's conversation. It's the latest in our Supporting Innovation in Education series, where we hear from thought leaders who work in higher education philanthropy. Lately, it seems like every day there are new announcements from higher education institutions about how they are planning to respond to this pandemic. And all these announcements have very serious consequences for higher education students and the barriers that could prevent them from starting or continuing their post-secondary journeys. Given all this uncertainty in higher education right now, we're very thankful to be hearing from two experts who I know are working closely with their networks of partners on the ground that are working to support students as they navigate the new reality brought on by this pandemic. So thankful and very glad to welcome our friend MC Belk-Palan from the John M. Belk Endowment back to the series, and excited that MC is joined by Amy Kerwin, who is Ascendium's Vice President of Education Philanthropy. Looking forward to hearing from both of you, amazing leaders this morning. And thank you again for taking time to be with us. With that, I'll turn it over to James to get our conversation going. James.
Great. Thanks very much, Javed. We're going to jump into it shortly. Just a couple of brief housekeeping notes. We will have time for audience Q&A at the end of this webinar. We ask that you please submit your questions through the Q&A feature, which is at the bottom of your screen on the Zoom app. Please note that we will not be unmuting lines at any point. And also, if you'd like to follow along with the conversation on social media, please use the hashtag INTWebinar, and please feel free to submit questions via Twitter as well. So with that, why don't we go ahead and get started? I'd love if we could start with MC, and I wonder if you could just give the audience a brief overview of the John M. Belk Endowment and the work that you oversee, and how that work has shifted in the last few months because of the disruptions from the pandemic. Oh, MC, it looks like you're on mute.
Ooh, yeah, details, that would help. Thanks, James. Amy, I'm thrilled to be on this webinar with you. I admire your work and your organization, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. The endowment stands in solidarity and wants to acknowledge and give grace to our nation's families, our education systems, our healthcare systems, and our economy that have long been affected by racial injustice and the racial inequities, and now further impacted by COVID-19. I appreciate and commend the Hunt Institute for providing the focus needed to make today's conversation about supporting innovation and removing the barriers to post-secondary education a priority. Removing these barriers was important pre-COVID and the racial awareness, but now are even more critical. Having a platform to reflect on this impact while examining together new ways we can all work together individually and collectively to find solutions to complex problems is a step towards healing. Today, I come to you from a place of respect, humility to listen and learn and understand. My name is MC Palan, and I'm president and board chair of the John M. Belk Endowment. Our sole mission is to transform post-secondary education to meet North Carolina's evolving workforce needs. Based off the Leaky Pipeline report that UNC Demography commissioned, our state's young people are falling through the cracks at very critical points. But COVID-19 made these barriers even harder to navigate, and overnight schools were closed, and learning was moved off campus and to an online platform. This made access to broadband and technological devices an added barrier due to community centers and businesses being shut down as well, as they had been used for connectivity locations. We heard from our partners that this was a universal problem, regardless if they are in large urban cities or medium to small rural towns. Again, overnight, Households became digital hubs for not only our young people, but for our parents and caregivers in the workforce. The digital divide had an entirely new meaning to the daily functionality as we knew it. COVID-19 personally impacted our team as well. Our team is a very collaborative internally and externally, and we spent many hours traveling the state. As we moved to this virtual world, we had to learn new ways to communicate and connect with each other and our partners. The biggest opportunity was creating consistent, safe space for our grantees to be able to just discuss and process all the heavy complexities that we're facing in such rapidly changing times. Around the same time, racial injustice and the racial equity rose in society's consciousness. The clarity of how equity was connected and playing out in COVID was even more critical. The pandemic has amplified and heightened systemic issues and inequities that span the education continuum from early childcare to K-12 to post-secondary and the workforce. It has also given our team some space to think and reflect about our own operations, thus allowing our team to recommit to better understand and enhance our work, our grantee partnerships, the education institutions through COVID and a racial lens. We believe post-secondary attainment can be the recovery and healing strategy in response to the impact that COVID and our racial injustice are having on our nation. James, I'll turn it back to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, MC, for those great opening remarks. Amy, I am going to ask the same question to you. Would you please just talk a little bit about the work that you oversee at Ascendium and what sort of pivots and changes you've had to make in the last couple of months?
Sure. Thanks and good morning. Thanks, James and Javaid to the Hunt Institute for creating this forum, as well as for the invitation to be part of the discussion this morning. Ascendium is working to change post-secondary education and workforce training systems so that all learners have equitable opportunities for socioeconomic mobility. Our grant-making focuses on removing systemic barriers faced by learners from low-income backgrounds, and we define those as first-generation students, incarcerated adults, rural community members, students of color, and veterans. Ascendium is based in Madison, Wisconsin, but our funding is national in scope. Again, we focus on systems change, and we do that through investments in capacity building, data infrastructure, partnerships and networks, evidence building, and policy change. Our grant making has 4 specific focus areas. The first is removing structural barriers to success, the topic at hand today. The second is streamlining key learner transitions, where we're really thinking about the transitions for learners from high school to college, transfers from college to college, and then ultimately that transition into the workforce. Expanding post-secondary education in prison, which I think speaks for itself. And the fourth is supporting rural post-secondary education and workforce training, which is essentially the first 2 focus areas through the specific lens of rurality. As to the pandemic, as everyone on today's webinar knows, the pandemic's disruption on the economy, healthcare, and post-secondary education is amplified for learners from low-income backgrounds, as well as for our partners who serve them. Ascendium certainly wanted to be a responsive and flexible partner with these ongoing changes related to COVID-19, and we've taken a number of steps to address COVID-19 impacts for both our grantees and our community. Like many of our colleague funders, we granted an automatic extension through August 1st for all grant reports and deliverables due from grantees. We also converted sponsorship and registration payments for canceled convenings to donations, recognizing that for so many of our partners, convenings represent a huge portion of their revenue. We reached out, obviously, to our individual grantees to learn how the pandemic is affecting their work, both generally and as it relates to specific grant-funded activities. And in April, our board approved a $2 million COVID-19 impact response grant pool to allow us to provide targeted, timely funding to grantees who are addressing challenges faced by low-income learners. We also became learners ourselves, and we became learners with respect to digital learning. Digital learning is an area in which Ascendium did not have any investments, was outside of our strategy, and we knew we didn't have time to ramp up expertise in that area. But we also knew, because the pandemic was forcing these wholesale changes to move either wholly online or to a hybrid model, that we needed to provide flexibility. So we reached out to a number of the leading national funders in the digital learning space, identified ourselves as learners, and have worked with them to identify opportunities where we can piggyback on their expertise, bring our resources to the table, and expand some of the great grant making that is happening in that area. Lastly, I'll note, in all transparency, that we had to push pause, or we decided to push pause on several concepts that our team had been working on prior to the pandemic. You know, we really are thinking about, is this the right time for some innovations that we had been thinking about, or randomized control trials? Is now the time? Or should we really be pulling back and letting the institutions that we want to support focus on COVID-19 getting up and running? So again, push pause on some work that had been in the pipeline for a long time. We hope to get back to that, but again, want to be pretty strategic and intentional about diverting resources from the recovery to new grant opportunities.
Great. Thanks very much, Amy. Very helpful to hear how you both are thinking about the work in this kind of new reality now that we're living in this pandemic. And that's a great transition into our conversation. So MC, the first question I'm going to ask is going to come your way. As we mentioned, we're talking about barriers to higher education, and a major one is certainly affordability. Has been for quite some time. And I wonder, I know that your team has been a key partner in an effort to address one aspect of that affordability barrier, which is the free application for federal student aid, or FAFSA form. I know because my Twitter feed has been lighting up with all sorts of FAFSA-friendly notifications for the last couple of weeks. So I wonder if you could tell the audience a little bit about those efforts and the partners that have been involved, and what you have been hoping to accomplish with that initiative.
Good question, James. Thanks. Last year, North Carolina left $89 million on the table in Pell Grants, which could have otherwise been used to help make college an affordable opportunity for many graduating seniors and adults. So why should individuals invest in higher education levels of education? Well, the numbers show that in North Carolina, 15 years after high school graduation, someone with a 2-year degree can make twice as much as someone with only a high school degree. And someone with a 4-year degree will make 3 times as much. I serve on the board of my future NC, a statewide cross-sector collaborative whose sole mission is to educate and upskill our state's population through our state's post-secondary attainment goal of 2 million by 2030. We know that FAFSA completion is strongly and positively associated with post-secondary enrollment, and that encouraging all high school graduates and their families to complete the FAFSA is the first step in expanding opportunities for our students. My future NC has a long-term goal of 80% students completing the FAFSA, but the COVID-19 pandemic impacted our completion numbers this spring. So schools in North Carolina were closed beginning on March 16th. This happened at a very critical time of year for students and families who may have needed an extra nudge and support to complete the complicated FAFSA process. After seeing statewide FAFSA completion numbers tracking down compared to this time of year last year, my future NC launched the FAFSA Frenzy campaign during the month of June. my future NC was joined by over 100 partners across North Carolina who helped alleviate this campaign. Elevate. Over the course of a month, we saw a proclamation from the governor naming June as FAFSA Frenzy Month, 11 live Q&A sessions via Zoom in both English and Spanish provided by College Advising Corps, a national reputable college access program, and the College Foundation of North Carolina. And many media coverage stories telling the students' perspective about how they were able to go to college thanks to the FAFSA. Over this 5-week campaign, we saw 63% of our school districts increase their FAFSA completion, and North Carolina moved up in the national FAFSA completion rankings to 19th in the country. We know that there is a lot of work to do to build a college-going culture and a FAFSA culture, but in North Carolina, I am proud of this strong start and look forward to much work to come.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, MC. Amy, I have an opening question for you now as well. You know, MC just talked about efforts to help individual students complete the FAFSA, which is kind of a barrier that many, as I said, individuals face, but I know that, as you mentioned in your opening remarks, one of your focuses at Ascendium is barriers to access on a more structural level. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you thought about working to remove structural barriers to access before the pandemic, and how those efforts have maybe shifted a little bit in the last few months.
Sure. And congratulations, MC, on your FAFSA frenzy. I think that is an awesome opportunity for students in North Carolina. At Ascendium, we see streamlining the transfer process, actually, as a ripe opportunity to increase completion rates, decrease costs, and decrease time to degree, especially for students from low-income backgrounds. More than half of bachelor's degree graduates earn at least some credits from 2-year colleges. So if we want to change something at the structural level that will increase access, I think transfers is that. Structural barriers too often prevent students from being able to transfer their credits, or if their credits can transfer, they often don't count towards the student's major, again, costing the student time and money. Data shows that transfer inequities disproportionately impact low-income students and students of color, and so we see state and system policies as key levers for change when it comes to transfer. Prior to the pandemic, we invested in an effort to evaluate the impact of the Institute for Higher Education Policy's Degrees When Due initiative. That's a national effort to advance degree reclamation for the some college, no degree population. We've also invested in an effort led by the Aspen Institute to help 3 states, Minnesota, Texas, and Virginia, to adopt transfer reforms at the state level to promote bachelor's degree attainment among students who began their college career at community colleges. Shifting gears in the wake of the pandemic, one of the grants we just made, in fact, last week, through our COVID-19 Impact Response Fund was to the National Student Clearinghouse Research Center. They are going to use that grant to determine the impact of the pandemic on student transfer rates. They're going to track student transfer, mobility, and progress, all in near real time. I think everyone on this webinar is expecting a significant increase in the number of students who transfer this fall. Right, they're going to transfer, we think, to an institution closer to their home, whether because they have perceived value issues with respect to online education to the institution they were attending before the pandemic, college affordability issues, certainly exacerbated by job losses, could result in transfers, as well as concerns for the students' health and safety, as well as that of their families. But again, this is what we think is going to happen, and I'm always leery of making changes around what we think is going to happen. So we really think it's critical to have access to timely and accurate student transfer information on a semester by semester basis over the next 2 years, because I don't think that the transfer rise in transfer is going to happen one semester and then be over. I think that the pandemic will cause changes in transfer patterns for years to come. We're hopeful that the information that the clearinghouse will be able to pull together will allow funders, institutional and state leaders make informed policy decisions and modify their practices to better support students in transition and not have the pandemic further exacerbate the issues that transfer has long held. We've made two other grants from our COVID-19 Impact Response Fund that address structural barriers, and I'll touch on them real quickly. First, we're supporting the Dana Center at the University of Texas at Austin in developing an intensive, interactive, virtual professional learning series for math faculty. This summer, the Dana Center is piloting the online series, which involves 6 two-hour sessions, and 5 cohorts of faculty will be participating in the pilot. The series will include the design of lessons, student supports and technical issues, and also help faculty learn how to address access issues faced by students from low-income backgrounds. To assess whether or not the online series made an impact, the Dana Center this fall is going to do an evaluation, and they're going to learn whether or not the class provided high-quality learning experiences to students in their math courses by measuring the impact on both faculty and student outcomes. Where they don't see an impact, then they'll plan in the spring to edit and modify the course and then reevaluate it next spring. So we're excited about that. We're also supporting the State Higher Education Executive Officers Association, SHEO, James, I think you mentioned them earlier, in developing an understanding of the nationwide shift to remote teaching and learning, what's working, and just as importantly, what isn't, particularly for marginalized students, and then using that information to make policy recommendations to both reduce inequitable impacts of online learning and promote quality. Ample research, I know we all are aware of it, indicates that a fully online learning environment does not work for a lot of students who need additional supports. And the onset of COVID-19 necessitating a shift to online learning for all students in a matter of weeks, we're really concerned that that's going to exacerbate those issues. So in partnership with New America, SHEO is going to be conducting interviews with a wide variety of constituents in their network to evaluate the shifting online learning landscape and then develop short and long-term state and federal policy recommendations focused on mitigating risks and challenges faced by marginalized students in this new online environment.
Wonderful. Thank you, Amy. That's a lot of exciting work that you highlighted, and I'll look forward to seeing it as it progresses. As a reminder, we are going to transition into Q&A, so if attendees have questions, please do submit them using the Q&A feature or via Twitter using the INT webinar hashtag. Our first question comes from Lee Hart from Better Future Forward. It's directed at North Carolina, so I'll go to MC first, but Amy, I'll also give you a chance to respond because I think this is a broader question as well. Lee asks about the situation of students who fill out the FAFSA and they get perhaps Pell and other federal aid, and they get state need-based aid, and yet even after the aid they receive, they still have additional higher education costs, whether that be tuition and fees or other costs such as housing or transportation that are often associated with being a higher education student. So Lee's question is asking how we can support students who have received financial aid but still have additional costs, how we can support them and make sure that they don't, they're not forced to stop out because of some of these additional costs. MC, do you have any general thoughts on that question?
I think the cost of higher education is very complex, and it'll be something that I think hopefully post-COVID we'll all kind of wrap our heads around and really look at it, and especially as technology impacts the future of the education sphere. one suggestion that's sort of a national suggestion would be in community colleges across the nation is a program called Single Stop. So if you're enrolled in a community college, you can input all of your information on your mobile device from anywhere, your home, on the bus, at school, with your children, wherever you are. And it connects you to not only Pell Grant dollars, but transportation dollars, healthcare dollars, and housing dollars. And so it's really sort of a comprehensive new online digital connector. Also, kind of in the planning and the front part of applying to FAFSA, I would encourage people to check out College Advising Corps. I mentioned them earlier, but they're a national college advising access program, and they just meet the student where they are and really help them think about all of the educational opportunities and help the student and their family navigate this complicated process. And with their help across the nation, they are helping students address that before it even becomes a problem. So that's a great question, and thank you for asking it.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, MC. Amy, any thoughts you have on helping students cover the full cost of higher education?
I think I was thinking about a higher level, a state funding opportunity. So less for an individual student, but one of the things that we funded a number of years ago with the Rand Corporation was really encouraging states to take a look at how they're using their state dollars that flow to students, and are their grants, state grants, having the impact that they expect them to have. So how much of their state grants are going to merit aid instead of need-based aid? So I think especially with the pandemic, there is an opportunity for states to really be thinking about the allocation of those dollars, and really, are they serving the students in the state who have the greatest need?
Yeah, thank you, Amy. That's very important. And another aspect is the state collecting data that allows it to track the outcomes so they can ensure these programs are meeting their intended needs. So I think it's a very important issue. One question that we have that has come up in a number of these conversations, and we've kind of danced around it a little bit in this conversation as well, but it's the question of the digital divide. And when you talk about issues that existed before the pandemic but have been magnified or exacerbated by the pandemic, the digital divide is certainly one of the first ones that come to mind. So I wonder, we'll go the same order. So first MC, then Amy. MC, I wonder if you can talk about some strategies that you and your partners have been employing to support students in this time of social distancing and staying at home, especially students who might not have access to broadband internet or a non-mobile device.
Good question. The larger digital connectivity conversation has been top of mind for us at the endowment for a while. And as we continue to learn about COVID-19, it is exposing the digital divide in very meaningful ways across our state and the nation. And those students and teachers and families and communities who don't have access to the internet or digital devices are at a massive disadvantage across a variety of fields, not just within education. So the digital divide is one of those issues that you've heard a few people talking about before the pandemic, but it was sort of a theoretical thing. Someday it's going to be really important for people to be able to learn from home or work from home or get healthcare from home. Then we had the pandemic, and everyone needed to be able to do those things yesterday. The North Carolina Broadband Infrastructure Office estimates that there are 1.6 million households in our state that either don't have access to the internet or can't afford it or don't have a non-mobile device to access it. That's about 1 out of 6 places where a child can't learn from home, or a parent can't work from home, or a senior can't get health care or SNAP benefits from home. We can't reach our goals as an educated state if that's the case. We can't make our economy work if that's the case. And we can't take care of our people if that's the case. But we have a new and an exciting statewide effort in North Carolina to create opportunities for everyone to access and be able to use affordable internet and devices. The Institute for Emerging Issues at NC State University, in partnership with the Broadband Infrastructure Office at the North Carolina Department of IT, are addressing the digital divide across North Carolina in a unique way through a program called Building a New Digital Economy, or BAND-NC. BAND-NC will provide a rapid response innovation mini grants to meet a wide variety of critical digital access and implementation needs in communities across the state. These grants will get subscriptions into people's homes and devices into people's hands. Grantees will also have access to technological assistance workshops to build out county-wide digital inclusion plans. The endowment has invested in BAND-NC as we believe in our goal to make North Carolina the first state in the nation where every county has a digital inclusion plan in place, and understanding that the benefits include a stronger digital infrastructure, which leads to a more connected North Carolina and a powerful way to bridge the digital divide. At a more local level, this hit close to home for us when we learned that the digital divide was a major issue in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg region, a large urban city. Our friend Sonia Gant from the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools Foundation approached us and shared that the internet connectivity necessary to access online learning opportunities was identified as an immediate need brought on by COVID-19. Through the partnership, along with the CMS Foundation, the Dave Tepper Foundation, and the David Belk Cannon Foundation, we helped secure 6,000 mobile hotspots for middle and high school students with numerous months of paid internet services for students and families without access to home connectivity. But this is a much larger issue that needs to be discussed as what would universal connectivity look like for our state. There's so much cross-sector energy right now for a concerted effort on how North Carolina addresses access, affordability, and the digital literacy barriers that stop us from realizing the full range of benefits that broadband and other technological opportunities provide. We think this is one of the most promising areas of system change in our state, and what we're trying to do is better understand the landscape of who's doing what, where are the gaps to be filled, and where we might continue to add value.
Great, thanks, MC. Sounds like there's a lot of exciting work happening in the state to address the digital divide issue. Amy, I wonder if you could respond to the same question and talk a little bit about efforts to support students affected by the digital divide.
Sure. I think I'll start by referencing one population that is often left out of the conversation about the digital divide, and that is incarcerated students. So for nearly all incarcerated students, access to the internet and to online learning environments is wholly restricted, even though access is available in terms of the locale where people are incarcerated. So one of the things we've been thinking about even before the pandemic is, in order to provide a high quality learning environment for people who are incarcerated, what does that need to look like in terms of access? And so it's a layered on top of the pandemic, but it's the same issue. If you can't access the internet, what does that say about the level of quality and engagement that a learner can expect? So we do see knitting together the digital divide discussion for those populations. We also have seen that it's not a rural versus urban student issue. I mean, it's both rural students and urban students are impacted by the digital divide, both access to internet and then access to devices. I think, quite frankly, this is a federal and state policy lever that needs to be pulled. We need to start thinking about internet access the way we think about electricity, the way we think about water, that this is a standard service that all Americans should have access to. And I think as we're thinking about structural changes, that's the lever that we think that Ascendium believes needs to be pulled, because we don't have the resources to support individual students and individual colleges and individual communities. Community by community, I think, is not going to get the job done, as certainly not on a timely basis. So we're really thinking about the state and federal levers that can be pulled to speed up equitable access to the internet.
Wonderful. Thank you, Amy. Very helpful additions to the conversation. We're going to turn next to a question from a friend of the Institute, Representative Craig Horn. Hello, Representative. Representative Horn asks, given the frequent reference to the complicated FAFSA form and the difficulty in completing this form, and I'll add one of Senator Lamar Alexander's favorite press conference activities was to hold up the printed copy of the form to emphasize how long it is. So Representative Horn is wondering, what actions can state leaders take to make the form more user-friendly, or perhaps to provide the kind of assistance that is often needed to navigate the form's many questions and requirements? I think, again, we'll go first to MC, and then Amy will give you a chance to weigh in as well.
Again, I think investing in college advising corps, so you have those advisors to help students navigate the complex process and all the forms. We have a heavy investment in the state, but would really love to have a college advising corps in every county in North Carolina. Also, I think having career coaches on the community college side, and there is, you know, the technology pieces, and the COVID sort of put all the college advising corps advisors into a quick turnaround and allowed them to have digital connectivity with their students and families, and it has really made a difference. So there's many more, but Lumina is doing some more systemic ways to address the application itself, and working with federal policymakers, and their research is worth learning more about as well.
Great, thank you, MC. Amy, anything to add on this question?
I think that since the majority of students who are completing the FAFSA are still in high school, helping counselors in high schools gain a thorough understanding of the FAFSA so that they can answer questions in real time that students have. Students often have a trusted relationship with their counselors and others within the high school. So I see high schools as a place where additional FAFSA completion efforts can happen. Apart from the FAFSA, since we're also talking about state financial aid, I think one of the things that states can do is take a look at the application forms that they have for state aid and think about, are they further complicating matters by having students have to fill out much of the same information on a state financial aid form that they might on the FAFSA, or is it additional level of hurdles and barriers that students have to jump through? So I think having states look at the combination of state financial aid forms and the FAFSA is an opportunity to streamline things for students.
Yes, thank you, Amy. Excellent point. We certainly don't want to make things any harder on the students who already have to navigate this federal form. So I think that's a very important addition. Another question from an audience member is more generally about supporting students, and I'll give you each a chance to briefly respond to it. This person is wondering about how we engage with students who attend institutions of higher education where they are not in the majority, and how do we ensure that these students feel comfortable attending institutions, even if students like them may be underrepresented in terms of the proportion of the student body at those institutions. a question that is certainly increasingly relevant given all of the social unrest that's happened across the country in the last couple months in the wake of George Floyd's death. So MC, I wonder if you have any response to this, and then we'll turn to Amy.
I think this goes to how schools and institutions think about inclusion and giving and providing safe spaces for students to have these conversations.
And I think also teaching students, whether they're in K-12
or higher ed, how to have conversations with people that maybe don't agree with them
and still keep respect and dignity intact.
Thank you, MC. Amy, anything to add on this?
Yeah, we funded a grant that's thinking, or that it's working with campuses to institute a culture of caring across the campus and not leave culture conversations only to faculty. So we're thinking about anybody who works on a college campus, faculty, administrators, support workers, people in the cafeteria, people in the dorms, anybody who has the opportunity to come in contact with a student, express support, be a resource, and really demonstrate that the entire campus is a place of caring and support. And again, I think it's just widening the view of who do you look to in terms of a person at a college campus, whose responsibility is it to provide that welcoming environment for students. And so we're excited about thinking that it's not just faculty, that it's people from across the organization.
Thank you, Amy. You broke up a little bit at the end there, but I think we got the gist of what you were saying in terms of making sure it's kind of a holistic conversation that involves everyone whose role involves working with students at some level. You know, Amy was having some internet issues. Hopefully she will be reconnected with us shortly. We have a question that was submitted from Lil Hayes, who works for the legislature in South Carolina. And Lil asks, in reference to another friend of the Institute, Dr. Timothy Rennick from Georgia State University, and all of the kind of groundbreaking innovations that that institution has put in place to specifically remove student barriers using analytics and data. And these are things like their GPS advising system, which creates alerts and steers students on a sensible course pathway, and other efforts to prevent summer melt by identifying students who may be at risk of not making it through their first semester. And so the question is really about, and this is another topic that we've touched on a couple of times, but how can data and how can analytics be used to inform some of these efforts to target resources in ways that address barriers that individual students are facing? MC, will go to you first, and it does look like Amy may be back with us, but MC, any thoughts on how data can help some of these efforts?
Sure. Data and analytics are critical for the future of our students' success as well as the institutions of education. Coming from the retail industry where you live and died by numbers, this conversation is something that we're very interested in.
Education is just behind in their thinking and in their funding
compared to the business sector.
And so I think really being able to think about
the data that needs to be collected
at a state level and what systems connect with each other. As Amy mentioned before,
their organization works a lot on transfers. Well, having a statewide data system that is able to track students' data from the K-12 system to higher education, especially with transfer population, is critical. But it builds upon itself, and I think it's an opportunity for North Carolina and many other states to really think critically about our future investments and how the data analytics are used. It's very critical.
It certainly is a critical piece that undergirds so much of what we've talked about here today. It looks like Amy may have joined us from her phone. Amy, if you're with us, the question was about how data can support some of these efforts to remove barriers. Would give you an opportunity to offer any thoughts on that question.
Yeah, I think I'm back. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Sorry about that. It's been a day of internet challenges. So the question is about data. Yes, I heard MC's response. We completely agree that data infrastructures at the state level are critical, and not just at the institution level. So we do have a number of grants that we're working on to help build that capacity and sustain that capacity so that state lawmakers as well as institutions have access to the data that they need to make informed decisions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Amy. Next question coming through. This is from President Algie Gatewood. Hello, President Gatewood. Thanks for being with us today. He asks, what are your thoughts on how to get more faculty, counselors, advisors, and leaders of color employed in our community colleges? And he makes the excellent point that for a student, having a role model who looks like them can be a critical factor in helping drive their progress towards completion. So MC, we'll go to you first for a response to this question.
I think this is the great question of the hour, and I appreciate you asking it. And thanks for what you do with the community college system. I think we really need to intentionally think about building pathways for people of color to help us teach, to help us lead in education institutions. There are some programs that are addressing this. One, there's a community college kind of administration pipeline that is being developed in North Carolina. There's also a program called Profound Gentlemen that is really intentionally thinking about building a pipeline of teachers of color. It's very important to have students to have role models and people that they could relate to. And it goes back to something that we mentioned earlier about having the safe place and the feelings and a culture of inclusion. And so I'm really excited about the opportunity of what North Carolina can build out in this space.
Thanks, MC. Yeah, it sounds like there's some exciting work happening around that. Amy, wondering if you have a response to how we can support efforts to get more people of color in leadership positions in the higher education space.
Absolutely. I think one of the ways that we can do that is by working with college trustees. So I think those decisions begin at the trustee level. And I think that there's plenty of opportunities for us to help trustees understand the benefits of having more faculty members, more administrators, more leaders at the college and university level look like the students that they're serving. So I think our approach would be to start with trustees and let trustees drive down the importance of those hiring decisions and really claim ownership of ensuring the representation of all students within staff and faculty.
An excellent point, Amy. People don't always think of trustees, but they really are very influential and important in some of these decisions. So thank you very much for that. We have a number of other questions. I apologize if we are not able to get to your question during this webinar, but we appreciate everyone tuning in and participating. We've got just under 10 minutes left, and I would love to close with some forward-looking thoughts from both of our experts today. So we'll do the same order, MC and then Amy. And I'm wondering if you can both talk a little bit about the medium to long-term outlook and highlight both what you think are the biggest challenges facing the higher education sector in the long term. But then also, if you're so inclined to end on a more positive note, would love for you to mention any efforts that you're excited about in regards to opportunities to reimagine certain aspects of our higher education system in order to produce more equitable outcomes for students. So we'll start with you, MC. What do you see on the long-term horizon?
Thanks, James. To answer the first part of your question, I do think that
There are major challenges on the horizon, many that we've discussed on this call.
but for the higher education sector, we're working with our partner to support community college leaders and other higher education stakeholders as they prepare for these challenges. And we've been encouraging students to move forward with their higher education plans, including through the FAFSA Frenzy campaign that I mentioned earlier. But despite
the uncertainty of the pandemic.
But we do know that many students and their families have questions about what post-secondary education might look like, both for the up and coming fall semester and also for the long term. And state policymakers, they're really facing tough decisions in the coming years as they adapt to the ways that the pandemic has impacted our state budget. And we hope that they will remember that higher education and community colleges in particular can really be key parts of our state's economic education recovery strategy.
I'm also hopeful that some of the changes brought on
By the pandemic will result in new system
of delivering higher education coursework.
We've already seen some promising creativity used by North Carolina's college presidents who have worked to meet students where they are by making sure that every student, including those who might be affected by the digital divide, has a way to access the coursework that will help them make progress towards a certificate or degree. Many of the students who previously
Faced major barriers to accessing
higher education could benefit from renewed focus on broadband connectivity, online coursework delivery, and flexible course schedules. But we have an opportunity right ahead of us to rethink how we can make
higher education available to students across our states.
And I'm encouraged by how our partners have pivoted quickly to ensure that student needs are being met. And I think some of these changes could benefit previously underserved students in the long run, and really be intentional about how we think about broadband, how we think about our statewide data plans and systems,
as well as really being intentional about building a pipeline of people of color.
Wonderful. Thank you, MC. Amy, same question to you. What do you see in the long term, both in terms of challenges and opportunities?
First of all, I'd like to say thank you for the grace provided to me as I was struggling with my internet connection. It's giving me a whole new sense of appreciation for what faculty are going through these days. So I think it was a good dose of reality for me. All right, so thinking about the long-term effects of the pandemic, I appreciate, James, that we could gloom and doom it here for the rest of the webinar, but I won't. I'll do two things that I'm thinking a lot about. I do expect that we'll see a significant increase in tuition in the future as state funding formulas are impacted by the recession. And I worry about the impact those expected tuition increases will have on equitable access to higher education. I also worry about, going back to the previous question, in the in a partially or wholly online environment, I worry about the ability of colleges to help students develop a sense of belonging, to counter the imposter student or imposter syndrome that too many students drop out because of. So I'm thinking a lot about what sort of supports need to be added to ensure that that doesn't get exacerbated during the pandemic. But if I think about our opportunities, I think that right now we do have the opportunity to double down on a number of the policy and practice reforms that we know can reduce barriers to student success and increase equitable outcomes. One specific example that comes to mind is the wholesale adoption of multiple measures placement strategies. Prior to the pandemic, most colleges and universities had incoming students take a single high-stakes test to determine whether they would be placed into college level or developmental math and English courses. And this, despite evidence that indicates that up to 1/3 of students assigned to developmental courses would have succeeded in the college level course if only given the opportunity. So with the ability to safely administer these tests for new students in question right now, I think we have a golden opportunity to adapt the use of new placement systems that will prevent students from taking unnecessary courses that cost them in terms of both time and money. Also, as I mentioned earlier, I see a great opportunity to address the barriers individual colleges and state systems create around student transfer. I think now is the time to shift the narrative from one focused primarily on tuition revenue gains and losses for the institutions to one that's focused on helping students complete their degree in the face of a global pandemic. And finally, I see this as an opportunity for institutions and systems to not only codify new ways of working, but to formally revoke or eliminate ineffective or harmful policies and practices. We too often add on and allow bad practices to continue to be options. So I think that the time is right now to eliminate those options that don't serve students well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Amy. We are just about time. We so appreciate MC and Amy joining us and providing us with their wisdom and expertise and insight. And we so appreciate all of you who tuned in to join us. We had a couple of really terrific questions come in right at the end that we weren't able to get to. Please know that we do intend to follow up with you to try and get you some of those answers because we really appreciate you all engaging with us. Before we close out, just a last final housekeeping note from me. I want to let you know about some upcoming programming that we have coming down the pike on the Hun Institute. This Friday, we have another great webinar conversation in our Homeroom with Education Leaders series. We'll be joined by folks from Oregon, California, and the Albert Einstein School of Medicine. Next Tuesday, we have a webinar in our Early Efforts series. We'll be joined by the Saul's Dance Charitable Foundation, the Buffett Early Childhood Funds, and the Robbins Foundation. And also next week on Thursday, we have a webinar in our Governing Principles series featuring lieutenant governors from Wisconsin and Iowa. And one final reminder to please check out the Hun Institute's COVID-19 landing page, which has a suite of helpful resources that span the entire education continuum. That's it for us today. Thanks again to our wonderful guests, MC and Amy, and thanks to you all for joining us today. We hope to see you again soon.
Thanks, James.
Thank you.